Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So I don't know if people actually talked about how their fast is going, but for those who might have discussed that, how has it been today versus yesterday? Or if today was the first day that you're fasting, how has it been going for people? Is anybody fasting except me? I'm out. Yeah. There's less people who look exhausted in comparison to yesterday. Yesterday, people looked like they were going to pass out. Mashallah. How's it going for anyone who's fasting today?
How's your fast going?
Mine? It's great. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. On our staff, we have people who kind of enjoy different rituals, right? I don't know how else to say this. Like there's a scholar by the name of Ibn Ata'illah who has a book that's called the Hikam, the aphorisms, wisdoms. And in one of his aphorisms, he essentially says, let's paraphrase, that God has given us diverse ways of worshiping Him so as to not make it like boring for ourselves, right? If you could only like pray your daily prayers, if you could only fast, or you could only give zakat, or only do pilgrimage, some of these things would likely be unduly difficult for people. It doesn't mean that the obligations are not the obligations, but some of us are going to fast and it's going to be very like spiritually uplifting. Some of us are going to fast and give us a headache. Do you know? The notion is you're not worshiping the feeling. Do you get what I mean? Like you're in a mode through which you engage as a medium to something that's bigger than like the means in and of itself. It's a means that's bringing you to something. That's going to vary from person to person. But why I want to get into the habit of kind of talking and reflecting is that it makes experiences a little bit more concrete than just kind of going through it and not allowing for ourselves to have that reflective mode or contemplative mode that allows for me to think like, hey, how do I enhance this, you know? Why is it that certain prayers I feel like everything is just very robust and in other times things are just really challenging? Or I experience my Islam not in a way that is the way some people's lives might be, right? We had a young person who used to be one of our student staff members that was from Malaysia. I don't know if any of you are from Malaysia or have lived in Malaysia. Has anybody here ever been to Malaysia? Does anybody here know what Malaysia is? Yeah, great. You do? You're the only one that knows what Malaysia is. You've been to Malaysia? Yeah. It's good food. Yeah. I mean, yeah, Malaysia's great, mashallah. And this girl, her name was Belen. She worked for us. Usually when I like travel to speak at things that are in drivable distances, I'll drive as opposed to fly. So I can take people from the community, students with me. And so Belen came, and we were going to Massachusetts. And for the entirety of the car ride, she was just kind of staring out the window. And I said, do you not like talking to me? And she said, no, it's not that. And I said, then what is it? And she said, where I come from, we don't have seasons like this. And I said, what do you mean? And she's like, there's no fall in Malaysia. You know, you don't see like the leaves change colors in this way. It was very interesting to conceptualize, right? Sometimes when you're experiencing things, you're not necessarily thinking about the things you don't think about. And so for some individuals, there's not necessarily a lot of fluctuation in terms of just what you're experiencing elementally in relationship to your practice. Because you're not going to fast in like the winter and the summer and the spring and the fall, because things are pretty consistent, right? The days and the nights, they can be extremely varied in some parts of the world. And in some parts of the world, they're pretty much consistent with more regularity, you know? And so there's blessings in being able to experience some of these things in different ways. But yeah, alhamdulillah, I like fasting. It's nice. Yeah. I appreciate you asking me. Thank you. That's why we're such good friends. How's it going for anyone else? Today, yesterday? Yeah.
It was easier.
What made it easier?
Maybe because it's Friday.
You looked so miserable yesterday.
I know you were talking about.
You were like,
No, I was really, really tired yesterday, but today, I was able to join Jum'ah like virtually. Like I had a different intention. I feel like yesterday I had a very late intention of fasting, and today it was just like more meaningful. We also spent like a really long time here. Like it really like set it up for me. And I remember what you said yesterday about like fasting the 13, 14, 15, and Monday, Thursday. And I'm like, maybe I'll just fast. Like, you know, like why not? Like it's actually, it means so much more now, thinking about what it means to fast than just fasting because you're fasting. Yesterday when we were asking like, why do we fast? Anybody that would ever ask me, I would always say because we have to. But I never knew like bigger meaning.
yeah, right. Rabi al-Basri, she's a spiritual master of our tradition. She says, I will not serve Allah like a laborer in expectation of my wages. Right? The idea is that your relationship with the divine is not in this transactional mode, but when you can implement a why that actually resonates with a subjective specificity to your intentionality, and you're vulnerable with it. So if you're only doing it because somebody told you to do it, that's the reason why you're doing it. And then you can say, is this why I want to do this thing? Do you know? And it's not an inherited religion, Islam. Just because your parents are Muslim, that in and of itself isn't enough of a reason to say, that's why I'm Muslim. But it's a theology that's a discursive theology. You have to be able to explain, like, why do you believe in the Quran? You know, why do you believe in Allah? And the answer could be potentially rooted in, well, you know, my parents or my grandparents, X, Y, or Z. But that's like the response that was given by people who are being challenged on their theology. And they get to a place where when the Prophet Ibrahim, for example, he's speaking to his people and asking, why do you worship in the way you worship? They fundamentally just land in a place where they say, because that's what the people before us did. But you gotta bring like your reflection and your thoughts and your contemplation into this so that you're in a place where you're able to yield from it relevant to you, not the person sitting next to you. Do you get what I mean? So today what I thought we would talk about in light of some of like what these days of Muharram are based upon, people have said to me, how is it possible that you can be an individual like the Prophet's grandson, Hussain radiallahu anhu, and he's standing on a plain of Karbala on this 10th day of Muharram at this tragic incident that takes place. For those who are not familiar, after the Prophet Muhammad passes away, peace be upon him, there is different opinions on who should now be leading the community. And you go through what is a calendar year associated with Muharram in the sense that the Islamic calendar is based off of a journey that takes place that's called the Hijrah from Mecca to Medina, where the Muslim community gets established in Medina. That's year one. This is why it says AH, it's after Hijrah. Right, so in the 61st year after Hijrah, this is after they moved to Medina, the 61st year after Hijrah, the Prophet's grandson is killed on the plains of Karbala by people who are representing the dynastic ruler Yazid, whose father Muawiyah was the caliph after he essentially had the throne abdicated to him, the Khalifa, the authority, by the Prophet's grandson Hassan, who's the older brother of Hussein. And Allah be pleased with all of them. And when his son Yazid is now given authority, Muawiyah says, after me, my son Yazid is going to be in charge. And to not go into too much detail, we talked about this at Jummah 2 weeks ago, and you should learn about this. You should know your history, because if you don't, somebody's going to turn it into something that isn't what is going to be to your advantage, right? Like, we took a trip to Palestine before COVID, right? Some of you might have been on that trip with us. May Allah make things easy for our brothers and sisters in Palestine and make us a generation that sees a free Palestine. And may the occupation that is taking place there end, and may it end soon. When you go there, there's like all kinds of prophets buried everywhere. And there's so many that we learn about, but you're walking through these places and the stories are being told to you. If you don't know your history, somebody's going to tell you a version of those stories that justifies and validates their iniquitous policy at the expense of a demographic on the ground that is already being held down. And you're going to take advantage of the absence of knowledge and information that you have. Do you get what I mean? And with Karbala as well, this is something that is an active unifying point for Muslims, because every Muslim says that this is a tragic incident. The grandson of the Prophet was somebody who undoubtedly he has a deep love for. Both of his grandchildren, there's narrations where the Prophet ﷺ would be carrying them upon their shoulders and making dua for them, saying, Ya Allah, love them as I love them. He would see them as he was giving the khutbah and descend from the pulpit, the minbar, to greet them and meet them. And then he would tell the people in the congregation that he can't help himself. He loves his grandchildren. If he was in prostration and prayer, they would come and crawl on his back and he would simply just stay still until they had moved on. And these people, they killed the grandson of the Messenger of God. And what ends up happening is that when Yazid, who is the son of Muawiyah, is given the authority, a lot of people don't think that he should be in charge. His habits, his persona, his character is something that is immensely identifiable as something that is lacking and inadequate. Where Hussein radiallahu anh is now in a place where he says, I'm not going to acknowledge this. There's people in Kufa, which we know is part of modern day Iraq, and they invite him to come there, to say, we'll be with you, we're with you. And to not go into too much detail, but something you should read about, something we've discussed here numerous times before and went into briefly at Jummah a couple of weeks ago. Essentially, as he sets forth now to Kufa, the Kufans, they remove from themselves the allegiance that they had made to him. And as he gets closer to Iraq, the entire city is turned now in favor of the Umayyad dynasty and is moved away from the oath of allegiance they took to the Prophet's grandson. And they're on this plain of Karbala, and they're in a place where they have opportunity to leave, but they stay. Some of the people who are with them, their family members were killed in Kufa by those who want to retain power. Others say to Hussein radiallahu anh that they're not going to do to you what they did to them because you're the grandson of the Prophet of God. They're going to treat you differently. It all made sense. They say, yeah, this makes sense. These armies now surround them at this plain of Karbala. And going into this 10th day of Muharram, you have fighting, violence, people are being kind of prevented from food, drink, right? You can imagine what it's like to fast in this heat. These were people who, they were prevented from drinking anything at all. And not just grown adult men and women, but children were amongst them. And on the 10th day of Muharram, Hussein radiallahu anh, he faces all of these people. And someone said, how is it possible that somebody could have that kind of courage? That in the face of immense odds, an individual human being takes on to himself the capacity of still meeting what inevitably would be something that is just going to take his life at the end of all of it. And it's an important question to think about, especially as we're going into places where our fasts are meant to be beyond just a fast of food and drink. That's an entry point. But as you grow in your spiritual sense, you want to also be able to be somebody who fasts from gossiping, who fasts from complaining, who fasts from being pessimistic, who fasts from arrogance. And so courage, if we were to identify it, is something that isn't about not having fear, But the definition of it is that courage is to still move forward and work towards what you're working towards despite the fear that you have, that you acknowledge the fear that you have. And our religion teaches us to see ourselves as whole people. You're not just the body that you have, but you have an emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical sphere to yourself. And there's parts to ourselves that sometimes we don't necessarily acknowledge well or detangle well, and then we can't confront them and they become paralyzing. Right? Like you have a goal, the obstacles to the goal are not necessarily always outward or external, but they're internal. Like I went to Turkey right after the earthquake. Some of you know this. I came back here and I showed you photos and videos. And mashallah, as a community, in that week, we raised $1 million to assist the people of Turkey. May Allah grant them ease and make this a community that continues to bring benefit to those who are in their time of need. When I was getting onto the plane, as I've shared with some of you before, I gave the ticket to someone, it's midnight, half asleep, and then I hear my name called behind me, and I thought it was the person taking the tickets. And I turned around, and there's 4 federal law enforcement officers wanting to speak to me. They pull me to the side, they start to have a conversation with me, asking me, why are you going? What's the purpose of this and that? I'm 40 years old now. Right? The first time I got pulled over by somebody like this. FBI visited me in my house. Detained, surveilled, profiled. This has been happening to me since I was in my 20s. So as we're talking to each other, the recognition is there that this is something that is not meant to just have a physical impact on me, but why would they need to send 4 federal law enforcement officers to speak to me? And what are they trying to get into my head? And now if I decide I'm not going to go to Turkey, the obstacle that's been created, whether I was the one to place it within me or not, is something that's internal, not external. Do you get what I mean? And these are the kind of obstacles we want to address that allows for us to live with a certain understanding that the person I am today is not afraid to meet the person I can be tomorrow. And fear gets manipulated very deeply, especially when you live in a society rooted in supremacy and anti-blackness. The entire mode through which fear-based constructs are built to impose upon us understandings of the other and ourselves in a way that utilizes this as a mechanism to be able to create a certain paralysis. And so you find in the story of Moses, peace be upon him, when he fasts out of gratitude, we talked about yesterday, when the children of Israel are set free from the tyranny of Pharaoh, they're emancipated. There's a courage that's there. There's a courage when Hussain stands on the plain of Karbala. Picture it in your head, one person in the face of an entire army. There's a courage when the Prophet Muhammad decides to take on the mantle of prophethood. A revelation that's so heavy that the mountains can literally not hold it by their capacity. But the heart of the prophet is so strong and powerful, what an entire mountain cannot take hold of, his heart is able to bear the burden of it. There's courage that goes into a lot of different things. There's courage when you have to be able to tell your parents, I am going to marry somebody from a different culture. I'm not going to be a doctor. There's a courage when you can tell your friends that your habits, they're not really good for you. We're not going to let you treat yourself in this way. There's a courage when you walk into your place of work and say, Friday afternoons are for me and my God. And if I'm here during the afternoon and the mid-afternoon, don't schedule meetings at this time. I need to pray. There's a courage that isn't about, I'm not afraid of anything, but I'm going to acknowledge the fear, and despite the fear, I'm going to still move forward. You want to understand how these things of fear work, to be able to see where it creates inwardly an obstacle that keeps us from getting to where it is that we want to be. And so what I wanted us to talk about today was this thing of fear. Because there's healthy forms of fear, and there's unhealthy forms of fear. And statistically, you can see that there are things that can help us individually to reflect on what become the common roots of this thing of fear for most people, regardless of their background, and how it is that we can start to address them in the context of our tradition, our faith. So it's not just about do's and don'ts, but it's actually bringing us to a place of potential. Does this make sense? And so there's 10 things that we're going to discuss today, not in deep detail, but I want you to be able to be comfortable in talking to the people around you with them. For us to be able to start to reflect together so that individually, when we're alone, we can also be comfortable in contemplating some of these things. And we'll go through these things based off of studies by clinicians, psychotherapists, that say in the work that they do, these are the most common fears that come up for people that keep them from now being able to live in that way. And we want to be people of courage. Not people of foolishness, but we want to be courageous enough, bold enough, audacious enough to live for something bigger than this world. This is what a shaheed is. They're bearing witness to the greatest extent possible that there's something that I want to live for so much that I'm willing to give up everything I can in pursuit of that. And that courage is something that once you're able to have it, it gives you a different frame and prism on how it is that you approach things in this world. So the first thing that is quite often mentioned, we're talking about fear, and fear that most humans have is a fear of change. People are not comfortable with the idea of having change in their life. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says that the state of the believer is such that it changes 40 times a day, and the state of the one that has no belief is such that they don't change for 40 years at all. And I see tons of people in the work that I do, for-profit, non-profit, business ventures, doing things here, resumes of all kinds, people sitting down with me. I got 10 years of this and 20 years of this. And sometimes I want to shake them and be like, no, man, you just lived the same year 20 times in a row. You're in a place where adaptability, development, movement forward is not something that you should be afraid of. But the opportunity to be able to embrace change and to have a willingness to be malleable on the things that are necessities to be malleable upon. Why is somebody afraid to let you marry someone from a different culture? Why are they afraid of that change? Why are they afraid if you invite someone of a different background to share a meal in your home? Why do they care so much what people will say? Why do I sometimes not take chances or risks? Why do I not jump into what is in front of me as an opportunity? Not with mindlessness, not absent of strategy, but one of the top things that you would find statistically people are afraid of is that they're afraid of change. What I'd like you to do is turn to the person next to you and talk about this. Why do you think this is? And how do you think it's something that if someone was to overcome it, why would there be benefit in doing that? How does this fear play a role in what you see around you, an unwillingness to change? And where are the gains that can come from only being willing to adapt and be malleable? Does the question make sense? You can turn to the person next to you. If you don't know their names, learn their names. And if you haven't been here before for one of my halaqas where we talk to each other, the idea is to not just speak when you have something great and right to say. All of you have something to say. And the idea is not to avoid speaking because you're worried about not saying the best thing or saying the wrong thing. Just say what it is. Share your ideas, your opinions. They'll become more concrete. And why do you want to know how to do this also, especially around this? Because aside from the fact that you might be afraid of change, You at some point or another are going to either be the cause of unwarranted change in someone else's life or potentially an obstacle that prevents them from getting to the best place they can because you're not letting them change in a way that's healthy for them. You don't want to do that. So you take a couple minutes, you talk to the person next to you. Where does this thing of fear of change come from? And why is it important for us to confront it and address it? And then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. And there's 10 of these that we're going to talk about, right? People are scared cats. Yeah, so let's go. Go ahead. Okay, so what are some of the things we're discussing? What does this make you think of, this idea of fear of change? Why is this something that's so prevalent, or how do we address it? What are ways that it keeps us stuck or from growing? What did you discuss?
I learned a new word. What is it? Self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy?
Yeah, she explained this.
Basically, you're put in a situation once where it's normal to feel nervous, scared, and all that. Then when you're put in the same situation, you're like, okay, I know the hoops now. And then you just thicken that self-efficacy because you've done it multiple times. And then it just builds itself in.
Okay, great. Jazakallah khair. What else? What do we talk about? Yeah.
There's a brother here and I are both in IT and we spoke about change, like systems change.
What's his name, man? You just had a conversation with somebody, you don't know their name?
Naveed.
Yeah? Does he know your name? Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So we're just talking about people like being very scared of technological change. I'm doing systems implementation, for example, and we just drew it as something that people have a fear of the unknown. But it may be different, oftentimes.
Other thoughts on this? Yeah.
I think change has a lot of risk attached to it, and risk brings a lot of uncertainty. So like, how much faith do you have in yourself, and how much self-confidence you have, and how much faith do you have in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's going to help you and you're going to grow out of this experience is what maybe we don't have as persons, and that's stopping us, uncertainty, risk, and faith in ourselves.
And paradigm shifts are important, right? You don't have to assume that you need change because you're a bad, terrible person. You're good, but good people can still also be better. And the whole idea is to get to a place where, aside from there being growth or movement, you don't want to just kind of be stuck. Stagnation in and of itself is a challenge, but a big part of it is going to be rooted in self-talk. And I want you to think, do you believe that any human being has the capacity to change? Because when it becomes now a difficult thing to impose on somebody else, this notion and perspective that I think that person's heart can be different, it's going to be that much harder to think that I actually have both the potential as well as I have the right, I deserve to have change in my life. The Prophet ﷺ, he saw people differently from the way as other people did. Right? Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh was somebody who the Prophet ﷺ, he says of him, لَوْ كَانَ نَبِيًّا بَعْدِي لَكَانَ عُمَرٌ, that if there was a messenger after me, it would be this man Umar. That under his caliphate, the Muslim community grew immensely. There's so many things that we can note about him, but prior to his being Muslim, there wasn't a lot of people who thought there was anything good in him. They would speak very poorly about him. They would look down at him. And he, in his own words, described some of his habits that he was engaged in. He was a great opponent of the Muslim community. Caused a lot of hardship and detriment. On one occasion, he sees a woman by the name of Layla, and Layla looks like she's going on a journey, and Umar asks, what are you doing? And she says that I'm going someplace to worship my God freely. You've made it hard for me to be Muslim here. And she expects an onslaught at the hands of this man, and to her astonishment, not only does he not do anything that mistreats her, but he says, go and have peace on your journey. She goes home and tells her husband, a man by the name of Amr, saying that this is what happened when I met this man, Umar ibn al-Khattab. And as she's talking and kind of recounting everything, he says to her, hold on, what are you saying? You sound as if you believe that this man could become Muslim. She said, why can't he become Muslim? And he says, know this, the donkey of Umar's father will become Muslim before he does. Nobody thought there was anything good in this man, except your Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so where everybody else is speaking about him in this way, the Prophet alaihi salam is making dua to Allah, Allahumma izz al-Islam bi'ahabba rajulani ilayk, Amr ibn Hisham or Umar ibn al-Khattab. That, oh Allah, bring some izzah. And izzah is not just respect in the ways that we think about it, but strength rooted in dignity and strength. That kind of respect. Bring some izzah to Islam by the one of the two men who is more beloved to you, Amr ibn Hisham, who we know as Abu Jahl, or Umar ibn al-Khattab. And Umar becomes Muslim. And shortly before he became Muslim, Hamza became Muslim. And when Hamza radiallahu anh becomes Muslim, he also has to be willing to accept change. That he comes into the city and he hears that the people of Mecca are abusing his nephew. And he walks into the court of the chieftains of the tribes with a bow still in his hand from when he was hunting, and he smacks them in the face with the bow. And people come to him to defend the people, and they say, no, we deserve it. We did this to his nephew. And he doesn't stop. He says to them, you're going to hurt my nephew? Know that I am now one of his followers. And then he leaves. And then that night, he sits with himself. Because they say that that initial proclamation wasn't necessarily one that had inward conviction to it. And he opens his heart up to the idea of change. Something that goes against all of what is the norm of his people, his lineage, all the people that are there. And when he wakes up the next day, it's something that's just in his heart. La ilaha illallah. If you're sitting next to somebody who's a convert in this room, they can tell you what happens when you actually have deep belief in something that even if you wanted to, you couldn't deny it anymore. And then you have to make the difficult decision that is rooted in, well, family that's not Muslim, friends that are not Muslim, customs, culture that's different. There's so many layers to this. But you want to be in a place where you're not the reason that many Umars are being turned away. What if he believed what people said about him, that there's nothing good in him? Then why do you believe it when people tell you that there's nothing good in you? See yourself the way that Allah sees you. Look to yourself and find your inherent beauty and goodness, and empower yourself based off of that. Not the acceptance of a society that wants to put you in a box and keep your light from illuminating the world. But something that makes you bold enough to embrace change as a necessary mechanism within yourself, so you bring change to the society around you with an understanding you're going to stand in front of Allah one day. So all I'm asking you is when you go home tonight, open a notebook and just reflect into it. What kind of change am I willing to embrace in my life? Am I that different than who I was a week ago, a month ago, a year ago? Not that I was a bad person in that time, but what's keeping me stuck? What am I afraid of? Why should somebody else be the person that's praying 5 times a day? Why can't that be me? Why is it that somebody else is the one that always is going to have the perspective on what this religion is about? Why can't I go and pick up a book? What's keeping me from reading the Quran? Why shouldn't I stop putting all of my reliance and healing into a drink or a smoke of some kind? Why do I keep hanging out with the people that I hang out with when I know that their presence is hurting me and causing me to do things that don't make sense? What's making it difficult for me to change? I know this job, all it does is give me opportunity for more money. But I don't get to see my family. Somebody else is raising my kids. Somebody else is now being a companion to my spouse. Why is it worth it? if you can change perspective inwardly, and you change what it is that you align. And for a lot of us, it's not even about changing, it's just about actually acknowledging what are the priorities and values that I am deciding my decisions upon. And if I was to ask you, what do you fundamentally really believe in based off of the choices that you choose? And with vulnerability, if you can acknowledge where you actually stand, it'll make it easier to get to where you want to be. But if you pretend like you're over there, you're not going to get to where you want to go, not because you don't know the destination, but you're not real with yourself in saying where you're beginning from. And is this really where I want to be starting from? Does that make sense? Okay. Fear number 2 that comes up, and this is not in any particular order, is a fear of loneliness. This is what a lot of human beings struggle with. I do a lot of work with survivors of domestic violence. May Allah make things easy for all of them. We're opening a shelter in the Bronx, first of many that inshallah ta'ala this community will help to build for those who are not able to leave from places because there's nowhere for them to go. Quite often people stay in relationships that make no sense because of this fear of being alone. Quite often people put up with toxic relationships because of not wanting loneliness. The endemic of loneliness that exists in the prism of modernity, it's an experience that's unlike anything that we've seen in the world, just how truly alone people are. And the subsequent challenges that stem from that loneliness creates all kinds of issues. A consumer-driven society that requires its gain to be rooted in you buying what it claims will give you happiness only if you purchase what it is. Profits immensely off of ensuring that you are afraid so much that you stay in things that don't make sense. There's countries in the world right now that have appointed to their government institutions ministers of loneliness. It's not a joke. Inshallah, Allah makes this a community where people never feel alone and makes us the reason that people feel loved. Because you go back to this point of fear, love is a key catalyst in both giving you courage as well as giving the recipient of your love a sense of strength. But this fear of loneliness is a very real fear. It can sit within me in ways that really become paralyzing. And so, if you can turn to the person next to you, what does it bring up for you? This idea of loneliness. And you gotta be willing to trust that the person sitting next to you, even if you don't know their names, they're still your brother and sister. And we don't get to often be in spaces where people can recognize what it is that we go through. Even if we come from distinct backgrounds, you want to just trust the person that you're talking to and let yourself be in a place where you understand that somebody's trusting you enough to have this conversation. Because if you went into your workplace tomorrow and somebody asked you, how are you doing? You couldn't really say to them, I'm just really sad and lonely, man. They'd be like, what are you talking about? Right? It's true, right? When you go for a job interview and somebody says to you, are you a team player? And your heart is saying, I hate talking to people. Can you say that to them? No, you can't. People quite often confuse religion to somehow be something that necessitates you saying that you are okay when you're not. That's not what this religion tells us. And this thing of loneliness, especially in New York City, is crazy. We literally don't live miles away from places. My family and I, we were just in the mountains in Northern California. We were driving through parts of Reno, Nevada, and there was houses that were like half a mile away from where the mailbox is on the road. And my son said, who checks the mail like this? He's born in the city. He doesn't really know how people function in places that are not as great as New York. But trying to think, you don't have a challenge that a home that is next to your home is that distant from each other. If you live in an apartment building, the door to yours is right here, and the door to theirs is right here, and you could live for years next to somebody and never even know who it is that lives next door to you in New York. It's crazy. How does it happen? What do we do to counter some of this? Because the fear of loneliness is a very real fear that many people go through that becomes inhibiting for their growth and potential. Does it make sense? You can turn to the person next to you and just talk it out a bit, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. What are we talking about? What's coming up in your discussions around this idea of loneliness? Who wants to start? Yeah, go ahead.
So you had mentioned like people staying in a relationship they're not supposed to be in because they fear like they won't be accepted elsewhere.
Yeah.
For who they are or for any other reason.
Yeah. And that's a very real thing that we see come up quite often.
We didn't hear.
He was saying, reiterating the point of like being in a relationship or a friendship out of a fear of loneliness that isn't good for you. Someone stays in a relationship where they're mistreated, where things are not honoring their rights. Do you know? What else? What else did we discuss? Yeah.
We were talking about how it's easy for people who are not originally from New York City to come here for school and for work. It's just like go to work and come back home and not really create communities where they feel like they can, feel at home and not be too lonely. So to get out of your comfort zone and meet people, get out there and meet people you can vibe with and have some interest. So like you feel comfortable and you're just able to not be too lonely and not have to like make bad decisions to be around people who are not making bad decisions but just because you're lonely.
Yeah, and you think about this, right? New York City, there's already tons of people. We have a really big community here, alhamdulillah. And everyone's pretty nice, right? But if somebody walked in, and some of you have been in this room and other rooms, the park, Washington Square for Eid, it's like thousands of people at times. It can be very intimidating. You have to think deeply, why are there hadith where the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that the best amongst you are the ones that greets those that they know and those that they don't know? Like if you've been able to find solace, you can sit down and talk to someone. Some of you are not saying the amazing things that you have in your head right now that would benefit all of us because you're afraid. And that's not a fault, it just has to be acknowledged. And there's that much more of a reason as to why then some of the rest of you have to get up and not wait for people to sit with you, but recognize it takes a different kind of courage to go and be with somebody else. To say, I know I want to sit with my friends tonight, but that person's been sitting all by themselves every night for these last 10 nights of Ramadan. I haven't seen that person smile ever. What is it that's going on with them? The best of you are those that greets those that they know and those that they do not know. This is hadith of the best of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Think about how it applies to this idea of loneliness. And the ideal would be that I can break out of my comfort zone, but I need somebody sometimes to also let me know that there's something that I still have to offer, that they're still here with me. Do you get what I mean? And it's hard, right? We have a big community. There's a lot of people who live in New York as a transient city. The number of people I could tell you that I go to the hospital with sometimes because they're at home by themselves, sick. They have nobody there to take care of them. You imagine what is it like to be sad, let alone being sad by yourself? What is it like to be ill and you're ill by yourself? But you have good friends, you make time for friends. We look at your calendar, from the time you're awake till the time you wake the next day, how do you have embedded in your routine opportunities where you are purposely going to just build now a sense of community? And if it's not there, what are the things that you're giving up for? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question.
No, there's no questions. You gotta tell us what you're thinking.
Discussed it and I couldn't get it, so I want to ask it from you. What do you think? What's the one best way to overcome this feeling of loneliness? Especially in New York City, you feel like physically, mentally lonely. So what's the way for you personally? How do you do it?
Do you feel lonely right now?
I mean, in general,
No, but right now, do you feel lonely?
no, not really.
Not really?
But
Why do you not feel lonely right now? Why is it funny? Why do you not feel lonely right now?
because I have too many sisters and brothers here, like I can talk to.
What did you learn from that then?
So I learned. So for example, she told me that she listens to Quran.
No. What are you learning about yourself from this moment?
About myself.
Yeah. If you don't feel that feeling when you're sitting with these people, why would you not sit with them more? If you only wait for the 10th of Muharram to come and sit with people in gatherings like this, every Monday night, there's people right now that come have iftar with us. We're not doing it here because the building closes at 8 usually. It's in my apartment building. Why aren't you there? When you come to Jummah, you can have multiple intentions behind it. We have a lunch every other Friday, Fried Chicken Friday. We didn't have it today because some of us are fasting. But this doesn't happen once a year. And this is where you take what you know and how you act upon what you know, and you keep them close to each other. And sometimes it's not so complicated. If you said to me right now that I hate this right now, that's fine. That could be very valid. You're not every person in the room. But you're saying, in general, I feel something, but right now I don't feel it, then do this a little bit more. And that's not about me telling you what I would do. That's why your heart is more precious than learning how to live your life from a YouTube video. This is why you have to have an understanding that the hadith says that we are meant to be mirrors to one another. All I'm saying to you is what you said to me, but back to you so you could hear it differently. That's what reflection is. That's what contemplation is. I feel lonely elsewhere. Right now, I don't. There's some of you who are sitting here right now, you still feel pretty alone, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We're all different people. But if you know something brings light into your life, then don't treat it as something that is just done on occasion. Bring it in. It doesn't have to be like overdrive. But it takes a little bit of light to push away darkness. So with the regularity that you need it, you make time for friendships, you make time for community. When I travel to any part of the world, one of the things that I do is I reach out to people that I know who live in those parts of the world, those cities. I make time to hang out with people. I'm going to go have dinner with a friend of mine on Sunday, who I love hanging out with all of you. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to have dinner and lunch with some of you this week too. Anybody wants to hang out this week? My wife and my kids are going away on vacation without me. What church they are, right? I don't even know what I'm going to do with myself. It's a great week for us to hang out. But my friend that I'm going to see on Sunday is somebody that I've known for many years. I make a regular point to interact with, to be in a place where he doesn't need to live in my house, but I know that I benefit from being in his company. Then when I go to cities that some of you will move to after you move out of like being in New York for some time. Some of you are here forever, just like me, so deal with it. And I'll reach out to people from our community when I go to these places. And I'll say, let's go do this. And they'll say, how do you do this? And like, what? Like, you're so busy. How is it that you make time to keep up with this person and that person and know what's going on with this person, or to say, let's do this together? I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for my heart. I know it's going to bring benefit to me. And in my self-care strategy, I know when I was in my 20s and I was working here and our community was growing, I was getting sick all the time. My weight fluctuated a lot. I was very heavy. I was very light. There was one Ramadan I lost 20 pounds. I'm not the biggest human being. I was losing more than a pound a day. Not healthy. I had this burdensome rhetoric where I said I have to be there for everybody and I can't let anybody be there for me. And I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. And the irony was, I was surrounded by a lot of people. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for you. And I know what I was doing to contribute to it for myself. And so you have to confront some of these things. Allah built us in such a way where we benefit from companionship. If you are stuck in an office, a classroom, a workplace, where everybody does not have the same ethics or values, you can't even turn on the TV. It's not to knock television, but most things that exist around us do not exert themselves off of Islamic ethics and values. It's not the norm by any means. You can be surrounded by people and still feel as if you are out of place. And so you find like a good tribe, and you make a point now of saying that I'm going to connect to these people with regularity. Do you get what I mean? This is an important one. It's something that a lot of us go through, or it's something that we let others go through because we're not doing our part to ensure what we can do to be there for people. In a community that has thousands of people, you know the visitor form that a lot of you have filled out to come here? We've had over 19,000 unique people fill out that form. I can't invite everybody to my house every day. Some of you have to start inviting people to your homes. Some of you have to put it upon yourselves to say, I'm going to ask people, let's go have suhoor together. There's amazing people who reach out all the time. Hey, it's Eid. Tell the converts to come to my house. They don't have some place to go. I'm going to set up a brunch. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. That can be you. And it's something that we need because we don't have a 200-person community. We have a 10, 15,000 person community. One of the things that we want to do in the next couple of years is figure out how it is that we can build something structurally across the boroughs so that people who live in locales with each other are able to connect in homes that you volunteer. We can get 10, 20 people together, build positive social habit formation while simultaneously creating a sense of belonging with each other. And then I can check in with you saying that, hey, how did things go? And you could say, you know what, so-and-so came over, they lost their job. Such and such person, their mother is really sick. Do you get what I'm saying? You be creative. Allah's the one that gave you creativity in the first place. Use it. Don't leave tonight without talking to someone that you don't know. Not in like a creepy way, right? Father told me I should come talk to you. So but in a way that helps people understand that you honor the right of being a brother or sister to somebody. Does it make sense? Okay, let's keep going. Oh my God, we did 2. Next one is a fear of failure. Many people have this fear that unless I'm going to guaranteed be 100% successful at what's ahead of me, then I just can't do it. I need to be able to do it perfection. This is why some of you are not talking right now. When I say who's got something to say, you definitely have something to say. You're scared that it's not going to sound as best as it can be. And then you prevent us from benefiting from the blessing that is uniquely you. This fear of failure becomes a problem. It's not embedded in our tradition because you had Muslims all over the place in that first generation of Islam that were making a ton of mistakes. The companions become individuals whose stories we don't just memorize, but you relate to because they're relatable. Ya Rasulullah, I committed zina. Ya Rasulullah, I drank alcohol. Ya Rasulullah, I kissed a woman I wasn't supposed to. All over the Muslim community, there are people who are going now through the expiations that are only possible when you make a mistake. There's a man who comes to the Prophet in Ramadan. It's Ramadan. He's fasting in Ramadan. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, it's over for me. That he engaged in physical intimacy with his wife while he was fasting. He says, I'm done. That's pretty much what the hadith says. When you translate it literally, Ya Rasulullah, I'm done. The Prophet tells him what to do. Emancipate this, fast this many days, 60 days, give this much in charity. Every single thing. I can't do that. I'm not able to do that. And then somebody comes with a basket of dates, and the Prophet gives, where's so-and-so and such and such? And he brings them forward. And he says, go and distribute this to people in need. And he says, nobody's more needy than me and my family. And the Prophet just smiles and he says, go and give it to them. Do you get what I'm saying? But these were not people who were the best generation because they did everything perfectly. These were people who knew how to get back on their feet after they fell on their face, and they had a prophet who helped them stand and deal with their reality. What would you do if in Ramadan somebody came to you and said, hey, I just did this? Do you understand what I'm saying? A fear of failure is inculcated in a core belief structure that is negative based. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of success. I am not beautiful. I am not good. And you have to have a positive self-talk that doesn't prevent you now from being able to move forward and feel a sense of what achievement is, not through just what the outcome, but the yield that is about engaging in the process in and of itself. There's no way you can do everything exactly 100% perfect. And if you only do things when you are able to do them 100% perfect, it becomes a real challenge. So this becomes another cause of an issue. Ways that we can help each other as we connect these things: celebrate people's achievements, but also exert kindness and compassion to people when they're struggling. Ask somebody how it is that they actually are and want to hear the answer. Let them know that it's not the biggest thing in the world, that things didn't work out the way that they were supposed to in your head. It's okay if you fail an exam. It's okay if you don't get a job. It's okay if you lose your job. Ultimately, the affair of the believer is unique. When something good happens, they praise the divine for that. And when misfortune befalls, they patiently persevere, and there's good in that too. This is what the hadith says. A fear of failure cannot be what it is that this deen inculcates within you, because it doesn't tell you that you have to be perfect. If anything, it tells you that your God is al-wadud. He's the source of unconditional love, that he loves you perfectly because he loves you with all of your imperfections still a part of you. That's what perfect love is. You just have to love yourself and then not put your stock in these arbitrary metrics of self-definition that says, I'm only good if I have a ring on my finger. I'm only good if I have kids. I'm only good if I have this or that. My self-talk starts to be, I'm a failure, I'm a failure, I'm a failure. That's not Allah not seeing your beauty, that's you not seeing your beauty. Do you get what I mean? Number 4, people have a real difficulty with the fear of rejection. They're always afraid, what if somebody says no? What if it doesn't happen? What am I going to do then? What if they won't accept my apology? Maybe I shouldn't say I'm sorry. What if they won't forgive me for what I did? What if they don't reciprocate the same feelings? It can be scary. What if I ask and they deny my request? What if I go into that place and I say, I need to pray, and they say no? What's going to happen if the elders in my family, they don't agree with my point of view? And this is something that comes up quite often. You're not going to be able to get some things unless you actually ask for them. It's just not going to happen in those ways. Sometimes people will say no, sometimes people will say yes. An important part to this is on the other side of it, you don't have to feel bad about saying no to certain things. Because inevitably, if you say yes to something, it means you're going to say no to something else. And there can't be guilt in this. I teach classes to people who have professions as caregivers. Yesterday, I was doing a training for doctors, medical professionals, and they were talking about burnout. And I said, you cannot feel bad about saying no to certain things. You have to be able to be in a place where it's okay for you to sometimes say no to certain things. You have limits in certain ways. That's fine. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a fear of rejection. We're going to talk about the courage that Hassan radiallahu anhu has when he stands on the plains of Karbala. The courage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that is not in the absence of fear, but recognizes the fear, and despite the fear still gets things done. This fear of rejection is something statistically that comes up for a lot of people. I'd like you to just turn to the person, 2 minutes really quickly. Let's talk about this one, the fear of rejection. Where does it come from? How do we confront it? And then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Okay. So, this fear of rejection, I think that's the one we were talking about. What did you discuss? What comes up for you? Who wants to start?
There are two things we were just discussing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is what is on the other side? Meaning, what's the stake here, right? So, is it a high stake that I'm waiting for, or is it something like, yeah, I don't care that much. So, that defines the level of fear. And the other thing is, how much effort have I put to do that thing? Right? So, if I've worked on something for 2 years, and then my application is getting rejected, right? So that's a situation where fear would grow, right? And would that even make me to the point that I stop working, right? Let's say I give up. So that's like, to us, I think it was like depending on these two factors.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. Anyone else? What do we discuss? Yeah.
The fear of getting your ego hurt. Like, you feel in front of somebody, you feel embarrassed, that hurts your ego. So, like, that's a big fear of why people don't change, or try to change.
Yeah. It's a real big one, right? I mean, think for yourself. How is it fundamentally possible in the last month of your life that you haven't apologized so much to people that you see on a regular basis? Do you know? Like the same thing, stakes are high and this and that. Like if I'm on the bus and I bump somebody, I say, I'm sorry. So there's no stake. I'm not going to ever see this person again. Likelihood in New York City. What difference does it make? But in the course of your day, you're sitting down with friends, with family, loved ones. You know you've done something wrong to them. What makes it so hard to express this apology? And where does the ego, where does the nafs get in the way? And this is the nature of the nafs. It doesn't want you to be forgiving. It doesn't want you to be generous. It wants you to be lazy. And it's not a healthy fear. Because it's not coming from a good place, right? Think about how much healing has not taken place because of the absence of apologies. How does it become awkward? Just think about it. Not apply to you, but just think about it. How does it become awkward to say thank you to someone? And then what becomes as a replace is a sense of entitlement, a sense of all these other kinds of things. You can get to a place where you feel empowered to, yell at a security guard who's just doing his job because you don't have an ID card. Or you sit back and you watch somebody speak poorly to somebody who, if not for them, you likely would not be able to come into Jummah in the first place. But what keeps you from sharing your voice? What are you afraid of in that moment? Do you get what I mean? And how do you normalize what it is to be courageous? Especially when nobody else is doing it, it's that much more of a reason that you should be doing it, right? I just want you to think, in the last week or month of your life, how many times have you said sorry? My kids, you see them running around. My son was here earlier for Jummah. He's gone home now. He didn't go by himself. My wife came and picked him up. I'm not like that terrible of a father. I say sorry to my kids. And when I say sorry to my kids, I say, try to understand. This is not superficial. I said something to you that I shouldn't have said. But also realize that just because I'm older than you doesn't mean that you shouldn't be apologized to by me. Do you get what I mean? Do you guys want to move up? Because people are coming and starting to sit near the door. And so that fear of rejection can be a real fear that comes into play. It can permeate a lot of different things. Why don't you ask for the raise that you deserve? Why don't you engage in conversations? Forget about maybe that person won't reciprocate feelings. There's people who, when they're married, they don't ask their spouses for things that they should be asking their spouses for because they're worried about this fear of rejection. And it can become paralyzing. It can have you just get stuck in places. And you start to now just talk inwardly and have all kinds of things that come into your head. They're not going to be helpful to you or anybody around you. What else? Anything else on this point? Fear of rejection? We'll try to bang through a bunch of these before Maghrib comes in like 10, 15 minutes. We're not going to get through all 10. And you'll find different lists of these. There's some that have 5, some that have 10, some that have more. Another fear that many people have statistically, that you'll find clinicians, psychotherapists talking about, is a fear of mortality, a fear of extinction, just a fear of death. You live in a society that takes its elders and places them in places that you can't see them anymore. There's a reason why every billboard has individuals that look a certain way and are not necessarily the oldest of people that are on those billboards. When you turn on a TV, you open up a magazine, the advertising is not necessarily always the eldest of elders. Mortality in and of itself becomes something that when you live in a society that is secular, and not secular that it just doesn't speak about God, but it's based off of a principle idea that this is it, there's nothing beyond it. And you don't get to speak about the realities of what death are in a way that give you a sense both of accountability and mindfulness in your actions, but doesn't make you hate yourself as you get older. I like myself more at 40 than I did when I was 25. I was a nice guy when I was 25 also. But the ability to be able to find meaning, to spend time in good company, to relish the idea. When I went to Turkey, one of the things that every person said to me consistently, when I said, what would you like me to tell people when I go back home? They said, tell every person that you meet that none of us woke up this morning thinking that this earthquake was going to hit us. None of us woke up thinking that our homes were going to fall down upon us. So tell them, don't waste time fighting over stupid things. Tell the people you love that you love them. Tell the people that you care about and you're grateful for that you want to thank them. Apologize to the ones that you have wronged. Forgive those that have wronged you. Don't wait till tomorrow to do what you can do today. Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, he has a letter that he writes as a text. It's called the Shahr al-Sadr, the expansion of the chest. Right? The way Musa alayhi salam makes dua, Rabbi shrah li sadri, that, oh my Lord, expand my chest. Right? Surah al-Inshirah that talks about the Prophet alayhi salam, Alam nashrah laka sadrak, did we not expand your chest for you? So this letter that he writes as a spiritual text is just a reflection on death and the importance of remembering death. If I was to ask you for a minute, if you would indulge me, and we did this in Ramadan, and maybe some of you were there, but just take a moment to think about what that would look like for you. If you were to look within yourself and you were to realize that a gathering was taking place that you were tangentially a part of, and you came to the realization that this was a funeral for you and not anybody else. And as you're now thinking within yourself, and force yourself to do this, don't start being distracted by other things Be centered and realize the importance of reflection. And as you are gazing upon what is a gathering that is of people that have come to bury you and honor that right, people start to get up and they start to speak about what it is that you meant to them. What would your family say about you in remembrance of you on the day of your passing? What would your spouse, your significant other, have to say about you? What would your children say about you, your nieces, your nephews, your relatives? A friend that comes to talk about who you were, what are the things that they would be able to tell those people? The person that you worked for, the people that you worked with. What are the ways that those people would speak about who you were and how you lived your life? And if the things that are being said about you in that moment are not the things that you would want to be said about you as you have departed and transitioned to the next phase of life, this is why you have to be comfortable with your mortality and not pretend like it's something that's not there. Because regardless of whether you believe in whatever you believe in or not, there's no person that can tell you that they're not going to die at some point. May Allah make the best of our deeds the last of our deeds, and let not any one of us leave this world other than in a state that is most pleasing to Him. This is why you cannot give in to a supremacist mindset. When you have the modern day shirk that is white supremacy, that seeks to idolize the self, it doesn't allow for you to then deal with the realities of what comes next. Because you can't believe in a hereafter and then live the way that the society lives in the ways that it treats people through that prison of supremacy. There's no sense of accountability there. You can't be afraid of death in the ways that people are that make them believe like it's not going to happen. And you have to be in a place where you can confront it so that you can recognize it. And the beauty of this deen as a mechanism that pushes you to a next phase of existence. You are a created being, but you are created for eternal existence. This is what our deen teaches us. And then when you can start to value it, I don't have time to make my kids' life hell. I'm going to tell them I love them every time they take a step away from me. Because I don't know if tonight is going to be the last night that I breathe a breath in this world. Why would I want to waste it on something so ridiculous? When I sit with people at the end of their lives, go to a lot of hospitals, sit with people. I go to refugee camps and conflict zones, sit with people who have lost so much. When I sit with people and they know their time is coming to an end, I've never sat with somebody who says to me, I wish I had more time to go back to an office place or to make more money in this way or that way. But so much of where their regret and remorse is rooted in is, I wish I had done some of these things differently. You can't think about how you're using this minute if you don't value the fact that your minutes are actually allocated to you. If you think that there's a guarantee that you are going to be sitting here a week from now, then you don't understand who God is in this religion. But when you can embrace it as a mode of empowerment and not be afraid of it, so that you're not spending hours that have been given to you in pursuit of nothing. This is Quran. It's not that people are going to stand in front of Allah with books that are riddled with actions that are just abhorrent, but angels are going to come to people on the day of judgment and they're going to open up their books and they're going to say to those people, how much time did you actually spend in that world? There's nothing in your book. Some of us are going to say, maybe we were there for a day, for an hour, because it doesn't translate well. Do you know what I mean? It's very real. Like you want to have a healthy khawf, a healthy fear, a deep reverence of your Creator. but acknowledge that the way it's built purposefully is to get you to pursue in this mode that has you limit your preparation for what's going to inevitably come next, while seemingly putting all of your stock in just what is right here in front of you in pursuit of immediate gratification and complacency. So you take some time and just think in an empowering way, reflective, contemplative. Because Allah says, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتِ, that He is the one who has created death. It's still a creation of His. Nothing can hurt you or do anything to you other than what the Creator is allowing for it to do. And death in our tradition is not something that's finite. It's just the means through which we get to the next phase of existence. There's a bunch of other things that we could talk about that we haven't gotten into. Fears that statistically most people have. A fear of being judged prevents a lot of us from doing certain things. What would people think? What will people say? Likely you have heard it be said to you, if not know somebody that has had it said to them. A fear of uncertainty makes it very difficult to move forward. And what our religion offers as a remedy for this is recognizing that if tomorrow is unknown to you, but also the one that is in control of tomorrow, your Creator, is unknown to you, that those two things together, they're going to create anxiety inwardly. But a way to deal with the uncertainty of tomorrow is to spend some time today in reflecting on who is Allah to you. Not somebody else's rote memorization, but really reflecting, who is God to me? Who do I believe God to be? Do I believe in a God that identifies Himself from page 1 as the most merciful and most compassionate, the one who is going to be the master and owner of the day of judgment? Do I believe in a God that's an angry old man in the sky looking for a reason to punish me? Do I believe in a God that loves me more than a mother loves his child? Do I even know who the God is that I believe in? It'll help to deal with the uncertainty. And other things. For those who came in later while we're talking about this, is in the frame of these days of Muharram, where one is asking, how is it that Hussein radiallahu anh can stand on the plain of Karbala? What kind of valiant individual with this courage? Courage is not living with no fear. Courage is still getting done despite the fears that you have. And these are fears that we know from studies, clinicians, statistics, that most people have. We went through about 5 or 6 of them. There's a bunch more that we can go through. You want to start to detangle and deal with some of the inward angst that's there. Confront them, address them, so that they're removed and you can get done what it is that you have the ability to get done. Fundamentally, why? Because it'll be a source of contentment. You don't want to live in reaction to fear. You want to be in a place where you live with a bold audacity. And ask Allah to make you one who has a bold and audacious heart, and that you let that heart be sovereign over you. And then 2, one day you're going to stand in front of your God. And know that in our tradition, we have a God that's going to look for every single reason to accept from us. It doesn't mean you don't want to try your best here. You can't try your best if you're walking on eggshells constantly. Or even worse, you're not moving at all. So take from the example of Ali radiallahu anhu, Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, from their children, Hassan and Hussein, who the Prophet says that they're going to be the Sayyids of the Shabab of Jannah. May Allah make us their companions in the highest levels of Jannah in the world beyond this one. But let them be exemplars, that you start to say, I want to be like this. And then you deal with the clutter inside that makes it a little bit more difficult. And where you can, you be the reason that someone has hope in the world. Don't leave here today without talking to someone that you've never met before. Let them be in a place where your presence affirms for them that they can keep coming back to this space. Inshallah ta'ala, Allah will grant us control over our fears, and increase us in the courage needed to be able to get done what we have the ability to in this world while we have the time to do so.